Hello, and welcome to our newest episode of Association Transformation. Excited to be back, our weekly international conversation about everything that is the association and nonprofit world, from strategies, from mistakes, from challenges, to fears, to opportunities. We are where associations are discussed and advanced, and I'm excited to be back with my co-host, Mr. Andrew Chamberlain of Consort Strategies. I am Elisa Pratt, your co-host of Brewer Pratt Solutions, and on behalf of and in support of the Institute of Association Leadership, we are excited to be with you today. I give you that introduction, and Andrew, tell us what we're talking about and who is joining us today. I'm excited.
Thanks, Lise. Well, as we're recording this, last night was the traumatic interview between Meghan and Harry. So I'm actually wondering if we should be talking about that in this podcast, because I barely slept last night. Look, Gwyn is like, no, I'm not doing that. My God, no. This week, we are talking about something that, I mean, obviously, I'm always excited about the association topics we discuss, of course. But of particular significance to me, and I think, quite frankly, to every living soul on this planet, is the issue of social responsibility, addressing social justice, ways in which we can deliver sustainability and sustainable development. I'm always very excited to talk about these subjects, and as listeners will know, one of the IAL's major initiatives is the Ignite program. We call it Ignite because we're starting a social justice fire. And what we want to do is we want to capture the energy and the spirit and the focus of membership organizations and the reach and the influence that membership organizations have around the world in starting that fire and addressing our social responsibilities, not just in terms of climate change and the physical environments, but also in terms of, all of the social justice issues that we as a global society are having to deal with. And by that I mean things like gender inequality, access to education, modern slavery, all these issues that are captured in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And so I'm delighted that joining us this week on the pod, we have Jill Poet, who is the Chief Executive for the Organization for Responsible Businesses. Hello, Jill. How are you?
Hi, Andrew. I'm really good. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Excellent. I'm going to be honest. Yours is a new but exciting organization for me, and I'm very, very, very excited to learn more about what you guys do. Not just in the pod, but after this as well. We're also
absolutely.
joined. Brilliant. Excellent. We're also joined by Gwyn Jones, who is director. Would you notice when I say Jones, I say it in a really Welsh accent? Gwyn Jones, who's the director, one of the directors at the Association of Sustainability Practitioners. Listeners will remember that Gwyn ran one of our Ignite Masterclasses just a couple of weeks ago. Gwyn, it is so good to see you again. How are you, sir?
Diolch, Andrew. Fantastic. Thanks.
Check it
Izzy,
out.
make sure. Izzy, add captions to this episode. We're going to need
That's
those.
right. That's right. Yeah.
That means it's your round, Andrew.
Don't tell Elisa that, because last night Lisa was texting me saying that I was Welshing, and I said I'm not Welshing. I'm Welsh. Welshing is something completely different.
Totally different, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Let's stick to the topic, Andrew.
Topic,
please.
Yeah, let's do. Let's talk social innovation. Right now, everyone who's heard me witter on will know that I believe strongly that associations have, I would argue, one of the most significant opportunities when we talk about social responsibility, sustainability, the UN SDGs. I think they have one of the biggest opportunities because, the membership sector, the membership world, if you just look at the UK context, trade associations represent 500,000 businesses in the UK. When you think about all the people who work in those businesses, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And that's just, that's 3,000 trade associations. There's 100, if I'm right in thinking this, I think it's something like 110,000 associations on the North American continent or something like that. Membership bodies, is it more than that? Is it? Maybe I'm just thinking trade. There's a lot. I mean, Australia, there's 26,000. Canada, there's 53,000. The reach is crazy. And so I want to see membership bodies and associations be not just responsible businesses in themselves, but to use their influence and use the opportunities they have to drive forward the social responsibility agenda. But when we talk about social innovation, sometimes, let's be fair, people look at me blankly. So, and I don't blame them at all. So help me, I know, Gwyn, we ran a masterclass a couple of weeks ago where we spoke about social entrepreneurship. But, Jill, when we talk about social innovation, what actually are we talking about?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because to me, social innovation is anything, any aspect, however tiny, however big, that's going to start driving a change um, in the country, in the world. And I suppose that's why I always like to focus on small businesses and avoid the word social entrepreneur. I always call myself a social entrepreneur because everything I do is specifically about driving that change. But we have loads of ordinary businesses, high street hairdressers, barbers, accountants, solicitors, etc. Their primary focus isn't about driving social change, but actually everything that they do in not everything that they do in their business, still deliver their services and incorporate important elements of social change within that and help spread the message. And equally, that's where that comes into play with the associations. We always use the phrase doing good is good for business, and I think that's really important that you bring that to the fore. So if associations start to drive this down their membership chain by saying, look, your businesses are actually going to be more successful, more sustainable, even more profitable if you're going to embed some aspects of social change, um, so everyone benefits.
So I mean that closely mirrors, a lot of the messages that were coming out of your session, Gwyn, a couple of weeks ago.
Hmm.
Um, Help me understand. I heard what you were saying there about. I don't necessarily like to use the term social entrepreneur, but help me understand, Gwyn. Why would I not want to use social entrepreneur? Why would I not want to use that term? It's not a bad term, is it? So what is it we don't like
Yeah.
about it?
I wouldn't say I don't like it. I think what we're struggling to do here, and we're possibly thinking about this more than other people, is we're trying to find a name for something, a label. And I think just drop all the adjectives. Let's just talk about responsibility, be it corporate or personal responsibility. And I think, my starting point is we're on this planet. We didn't ask to be here, but our children expect us to leave it in a better state than we found it. That's our responsibility. Now, whether you're a business person, a lecturer, out of work, a mother, a father, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One of my members said to me today, said, I just want the world to be better for the fact that I'm living on it. So I want to improve the world. And if you take that to the SDGs, to the other extent, the responsibilities or the tasks we're faced with, 4 of them are economic goals, 8 of them are social goals, and 4 of them are to do with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And one is a way forward, the 17th one, partnership. These are problems that mankind has created and have to address if we're going to leave the world in a better place than we found it. So the simple question is, do each of us feel that responsibility? Then the question is, how on earth do we fulfill that responsibility? So inherent in what Jill's saying, which is a very nice way of describing it, it's another way of looking at it, is that if you want to create social change, the starting assumption must be that what we've got now is not adequate. So we want to change to improve it. And that is it. We are where we are. Let's not worry about whose fault it was we got here. But if we can support people to take the responsibility for improving the situation socially, environmentally, and economically, then we're all in the right track. And associations have, I agree with you, a massive role to play there.
Well, in that opportunity, to Jill's point, it's not just about how the association does its business and how it leads by example, but in how it can teach the members. I mean, the members really are the opportunity to amplify that impact. And especially in the trade association space, if you as an association are doing your business with a socially responsible mission, strategic direction, mindset, you can also through training, through education, through the elevation of this type of discussion, show your members how to run and be successful in a socially responsible way. You know, I think about board members. How do you convince them that, hey, we're going to focus on a socially responsible goal while at the same time also serving the membership? It can't be a zero-sum game. We have to be able to serve this more global mission and serve the membership. We can't let them think that one will take away from the other.
I mean, you say it can't be a zero-sum game, and I completely agree with you. But I think an awful lot of time, a lot of people come to the board table and they treat it as a zero-sum game. It's either, well, this has nothing to do with me, and I'm talking in an association context here, obviously, because that's where we're at. But, you know, it's like, you know, we deliver X for our members and let someone else deliver Y and Z because that's nothing to do with us. And one of the things I worry about and I struggle with sometimes is trying to, you know, how do we, what's the word? How do we convince, for want of a better phrase, how do we convince people that actually it's all part of everyone's responsibility without them turning off, without them turning off, I mean, Jill, what are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you, and I think that's where semantics, the language, comes into play a huge amount. Just to stress that the Organisation for Responsible Businesses, ORB for short, is focused on SMEs, particularly that smaller end. So the language with the corporates is somewhat different, but again, with the associations, the majority of the members are going to fit into that SME criterion. So although we want them to have that social focus, whether you're talking about the members or the associations themselves, you do have to be careful with the language because it's very easy to frighten them off, and it's part of the problem we're talking about social entrepreneurship. You know, if you say, do you want to be a social entrepreneur, and the main purpose of that is driving social change, a lot of them will go, wait, well, that's not what I'm in business for.
That sounds expensive.
Well, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
Expensive time. And you need to change the language so it's about those core values, and actually you can embrace all these things without any cost. You're going to benefit from it. You're going to have better employees, motivated staff, your reputation. It's talking about all those things, so taking the fear out of it.
Yeah. Andrew introduced the concept of the SDGs. The SDGs, most important SDG is number 17, because that's partnership. That says it's not a net zero sum game. It's not an optional. It's not you're right, I'm wrong. And just to be nitpicky, Elisa, it's not about teaching people. It's about learning together how we can create value, because no one has ever had to create sustainable business before. We do have to now, simply because of the footprint we're leaving on the planet. So it's not optional. As Jill says, there's so much data out there now that show that companies that operate sustainably are the most profitable. They win on every aspect of business: client retention, pricing, staff retention and attraction, cost effectiveness, because they're not wasting resources. It's just a no-brainer now. There is no business case for being an unsustainable business, because unsustainable means you will close. Sustainable means you will stay open. Simple as that. So I think we've, as associations and leaders in associations, we don't know what the answer is. But what we can do is pose the questions and invite people to step forward as people, as mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, not as CEOs and finance directors, and say, how do you want to fulfill your responsibility? What do your children want your business to be doing? What's the future they want to create? and we learn together how to get 10 billion people living in peace, in harmony with nature, and living equitably. We've never done that before. So I see it more as a learning process, and that means nobody's wrong, but everyone's invited to the party.
And I always feel in the association world, we should be pushing an open door here, because by their very nature, associations are inherently socially focused. They're inherently community focused. How they define that community, well, that's maybe the locality in which they're based. It may be the profession that they support. It may be maybe that profession's community. How they define it is up to them. But I think this, it just feels to me so obvious. It seems so obvious, but I mean, is it just? Am I seeing it? Am I seeing it through a perspective that actually I'm being unfair to I'm being unfair to those who aren't seeing it as an obvious opportunity? Jill, what do you think? Am I?
I don't think you're being unfair, and I'm going to say something that, once again, is probably a little bit contentious, especially as we have two gentlemen on this program.
Right, okay, here we
wait,
go.
Quiet,
right,
Andrew,
okay.
quiet, Andrew. Let her speak. Let her speak.
Well, she called me a gentleman, so it's like, yeah,
There you
okay,
go.
you can say what you want, yeah.
I think part of the problem, just maybe a small part, and it is changing, is the psychological dynamics, the difference between male and female. Because whilst I will always fight for equality, I'm also very quick to say, hi guys, we're very different. One of the psychological differences is that men, in the main, tend to compartmentalise. And so, once again, historically, and it's changing, but historically, there have been a very high percentage of men that in their communities or at home, whatever, might be really good with all these aspects, play a role in the community, very focused on reducing their environmental impact, social justice, all those things. They might be quite keen voices, but then they go into their business and it's like, I'm a different person now, I've got my business hat on. And I think that's one of the things that we need to break down. And that's why I was saying, I don't think you're being unfair. But I think this is the problem, the fact, as Gwen said, yes, we do all have a responsibility, but we need to bring it into our businesses. And there's a lot of business owners that are really nice people, decent people that want to see these things happen, but they're busy running their business, and this is down the bottom of their priorities. And that's the big question. How do we bring it from being down the bottom of their priorities to absolutely, as we've said, understanding the business case? Because whilst you might want them to embrace these things without having any arm twisting, if they don't, then we need to do a bit of arm twisting, quite simply.
I couldn't agree with your main point more, actually, because I think it's fundamental. Generically, men are brought up to be competitive, to be the alpha male, right? And that's one of the differences we're talking about. And to give you an example, the very first learning session I set up with a rather large, let's say, postal delivery company in Britain, with their sustainability team, I was in the preamble, I was talking to the team around a table, there's about 10 of them. And I just said, so how many of you do this stuff at home? And about half of them said, oh, yeah, it's what we do. And the other half said, no way, I get paid 9 to 5 for doing this. And it was a gender split. The women around that table, the members of that team, it was who they were. For the men around the table, it was their job. And they didn't recycle at home. They didn't care about these things. They compartmentalized it. And I think we've got that because and I think the word I would use instead of equality, Jill, is equity. In other words, everybody gets a fair crack of the whip based on their qualities and abilities, rather than everyone gets an equal opportunity to do a man's job. So we need to embrace the qualities that women bring to the table in our corporate models in the same way that we embrace them at home in most of our families. I say most because there are different forms of families now. And I don't think we can overlook that, because if we do, we're alienating the men and the women. And I think what I first noticed in the work in sustainability was the men were leading the way in their own groups. And it wasn't mean they were all leaders. There were men who actually understood their feminine side and were not ashamed or afraid to call on it. And that meant they could accommodate and respect the women who were in the room and learn from them how to behave, in quotes, in a civilized way in a board meeting, for instance, and allow the woman's voice and qualities to enter the room and be heard and be respected. And we live in a nature which has a certain balance of gender. The more we deviate from that, the more we're becoming unnatural and are less likely to be able to work in harmony with nature. So yeah, it's a fundamental point, Phil. Absolutely.
It's blowing my mind. I'm going to be honest. It's blowing my mind because now you've, and in a good way, it's blowing my mind because now you've sort of, I've never really thought of it in this context before. And as you're talking about it, I'm then mapping backwards and thinking, right, so all these different issues, all these different problems that we're dealing with, all these, these industry-led problems, as much as there are industry-led solutions. And I'm thinking, yeah, actually, I see what you're talking about here in terms of behaviors and it's yeah, Oh, I think we'll just. Oh, I'm lost for words. Actually, I'm just trying to work it out.
To pick on Jill's last point, I refuse to talk about cost-benefit analysis with business people because that means they think it's optional. That if it doesn't look like it's going to make a profit, they won't do it. In other words, they're not seeing it as something that they have to do to leave the world in a better place for their children. So I'll just leave one reference. Go and Google Ray Anderson interface flaw and get his first video. That's a businessman who woke up to his responsibilities in 1995 when he suddenly realized that, oh my God, if the people saw what I was doing in my factory to the earth, what the impact we're having, they would lock me up. I am killing species. I'm killing the earth. And then he looked at his children and realized they would be the person that would put me in prison. So I don't go to the cost-benefit analysis. I go to, what do your children expect from you? What do they hope you're doing at work?
Which is a far...
Yeah, everyone can respond to that.
Well, I was going to say it's a far more human way of looking at it, isn't it? Far more,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that means it's inclusive.
Yes. Jill,
every person can step forward. Sorry, Jill, go on.
No, it's fine. I agree. I think we need to embrace both because people will listen to different elements. There are people. I mean, I've had people say to me, "Well, I won't be here, so why should I worry about what happens when I'm gone?" And people who have got children and grandchildren, and you go, "Really?" But it has been said. So there you go. But an interesting aspect when we were talking about associations and how they feel about it. Many years ago, I was involved at regional level with one of the biggest small business membership associations that we have. And I went to see the then, I forget his actual title, but one of the top directors at head office in London. And they knew the work we were doing with Orb, and I took with him my workbook, which is the basis of this course that we're working on for responsible business social value, because I wanted them to do exactly what we're talking about now, embrace it and use that as a vehicle to push it down to their membership. And we had a chat, and he was involved in quite a lot of social enterprises, did a lot of stuff in the community, absolutely got what I said. He looked at the workbook and said, "This is fabulous," because it's very pretty, we're very proud of it. But he looked at it and said, "This is fabulous, look through the content, it's really, really good." Okay, so can we do something with this? Can we encourage your membership to embrace these aspects? Oh no, we can't do that. We're already asking too much of them. End of conversation.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Honestly,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
But that's so true, Jill, because we're not starting with a clean sheet of paper with any businessman or any business person. We're talking about the here and now, and if we can't learn how to take a business on the next step on the journey, which might be their first step, we can't give them an ocean to boil. We have to be realistic and move them steps at a time. But they have to
and
want to do the journey.
and
They
I
have to want
agree.
to.
It's
Yeah.
that's so small. Getting them on that first step, getting them on the first
Yeah.
step of the ladder. That is the most crucial aspect of it, because once they get on there, they begin to see it, and you see
Yeah.
that escalating so quickly.
Well, and I love Jill's thoughts about, your children. What do your children expect of you, and how should we leave the world better? My question to associations is, what do your members of 2050 expect?
Yeah.
What organization
Absolutely.
do they expect? What world, what industry do they expect you to have facilitated and left for them? I think we can use that child inheritance piece and convert it to a membership perspective as well.
And as well as I, when we're in that strategic planning mode, when we start talking about generative thinking, and we ask people to put themselves in a generation hence, it is difficult, and I have a huge amount of empathy for them. When you're saying, right, actually, we're not just talking about not being, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. We're talking about putting yourself in someone else's shoes in a different time, and I understand why it's a challenge. I understand, but I'm conscious. I hate having to bring pods like this to a close, but I'm conscious of time. But I feel like we could this. Do you know what? I know that this is the first of a lot of conversations, but I feel like we're almost talking about when we've been talking about. I don't know if this is a term, but it's almost like, how do we embed a corporate emotional intelligence, if you like, for want of a better phrase, within the world, and what can I am going to pull us back in and bring this conversation to a close right now, but I'm going to do so by posing a question, which is, and I would like us to try and answer it as best we can, but what can associations do we think, to influence the adoption of that corporate EQ, if you like, and that awareness that actually we all have a responsibility to be responsible, to each other and to future generations. I mean, Jill, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on where associations, or how associations can do this?
I think it's all about the language, and it's all about making it easy, in relatable terms, never moving away from the fact that businesses have got to make a profit, and they've got to. It's all about excelling in their business, actually. So
Yeah,
it's repeating what I've already said, but if
yeah,
you want to excel in your business, this is part of the agenda, and your and your children will love you for it. If you can
yeah.
bring it all together in that same sort of way, I think that's really important. And I hope that the course that we're working on, it may play
Yeah.
a role in that as well, because we're going to make it really affordable for people to access it. And I don't want to sell it sounds if I'm here sort of selling something, but I genuinely hope that it's going to be a really useful tool for all businesses.
Okay. Okay, this podcast is brought to you in association with Orb, who are doing that. But I think there's more. There's much more. I mean, talking on behalf of the IAL, I think there's much we can do together. But Gwyn, your thoughts. I know I've heard you say it many times. Responsible business is good business. So what is it we can? How can we get associations to influence?
Sorry, it froze. Is that what was the question again, Andrew?
Okay. This is where we find out it froze after 10 minutes, and Gwyn's just been thinking, "What are they talking about?" Um,
I just been to the toilet.
What is it that, how can we help, or how can associations help their membership, influence their membership in adopting this corporate EQ and recognizing that, and addressing helping members address their responsibilities to one another?
Yeah. It's a huge question, and as we've discussed today, there's so many different facets to it. But the one I would add to what Jill said is that let's stop talking about corporate responsibilities, because corporations don't exist. It's people, and responsibility is not a burdensome thing; it's an opportunity. And as several people have said today, it's an opportunity to create something worthwhile for your children to live into. And if you haven't got children, then think of it as the children around you, the children you see in the streets. If you start working with students, etc., this is becoming a social norm. The social norm is not that companies and organizations and businesses and charities wreck the planet. The norm, the expectation is that they nurture it. So any organization that's not on that journey now is going to become irrelevant. So associations, if they want to keep adding values to the members, they have to find out what their members want to create for their children as parents and business people, and use business, as you said, in another way, as a force for good. And I'll go back to Anita Roddick's statements. The one that I love is that there's always another way. The way that got us to where we are now is not the way that will take us where we need to be. We are free to choose a different pathway. The youth are choosing that pathway. If associations aren't in step and be supportive of that, they will become redundant and eventually unsustainable.
Wow, this is the beginning of a much larger conversation than any of us, and I love Gwyn's perspective of make it personal, make it about the narrative that resonates with the children around you, with the people at your board table. This isn't about corporations. Corporations is almost the bad word in all this, and responsibility connotates a task, a burden. So I love Jill's point about making it easy. We have to remember this will need to be the path of least resistance for a majority of people. And I love what both of you had said. Thank you so much, Gwyn. Thank you, Jill, for shepherding this conversation, for helping show Andrew and I some amazing things that are going on. Jill, we very, very much appreciate your masterclass as well. It's coming up on the 18th of March, and we hope people will be able to join the IAL for that, igniting the power of the small business community for social good. And we are excited to have you back in the family for that conversation. So thank you both for your time. Thank you for joining us on Association Transformation, and to my co-host. I'm excited to have gotten through another podcast. We've done it again, my friend, and I think these are important conversations that we continue to push the association sector to have. Not always comfortable, not always short, not able to tie up with a nice bow, but these are the important questions to be asking. And I thank you for doing this with me. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to join us wherever you find your pods and make us one of your favorites. If you have a subject that you'd like to bring to the forefront, or a topic you'd like to follow up on, you can tweet us at Association Transformation, or email us at hello@yourconsort.com, and we'll draw upon our network, your thoughts, and the experts in this industry like Gwyn and Jill to bring you the best conversations in the nonprofit and association space. So until next time, we say stay well and put your members and your mission first.
Association Transformation is brought to you in partnership between Consort Strategy and Brewer Pratt Solutions, in support of the Institute of Association Leadership.